Right, so good morning everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on raising the bar with Office 365 usability, productivity and control. My name is Matt Maunder and I'll be taking you through this webinar today and explaining a little bit around how Office 365 can be leveraged for its best effect. Now this is probably one of our most subscribed webinars, so clearly this is a topic of interest, so we'll crack on and very much hope you take something out of today's session. Now, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping elements. Now, this will be a 30-minute webinar, so we'll go through some elements. And after the session today, we will also be taking some Q&A. So we'll have some time after the 30 minutes for some Q&A, which can be asked through the GoToMeeting control panel. So if you do have any questions, please do ask them through that, and someone will be able to either assist or we'll take them, as I say, at the end of this session. Audio today and visuals are provided through GoToWebinar, as you can see. If you are having issues with either the audios, the visuals, or otherwise, again, please do use the Q&A panel, and one of my colleagues who are also on the webinar will be able to assist you with any difficulties you may be having. So, the agenda for today. So, previously in this webinar series, we've been talking about how clients can effectively look to move to Office 365 and how we at Automated Intelligence can help clients understand their information better, how they can cleanse, categorize, and better manage their content and move their information to the cloud, and ultimately, ensure their information gets to the right place, whether you're consolidating your information, moving to on-premise, moving to the cloud, or otherwise. What we're discussing today is how we can then help manage the information once it's there, once it's in the cloud, in Office 365, how do we effectively manage the information most effectively? Because Office 365 is huge with a lot of proven benefits, but there are still some fundamental challenges that we need to discuss around the management of information, applying policy, and taking control of your data in the cloud. So, and a lot of that stems from what are your requirements? What is it you're trying to achieve? So we're going to be going and discussing a couple of those challenges today, and then we'll also think about how we can involve the user in that process as well, because I'm sure you can appreciate the user is absolutely fundamental in any move or adoption to a cloud-based platform. I'll be showing you a couple of demonstrations today as well, just to illustrate at a very high level how we can help achieve some of these concepts. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be going through some Q&A at the end to answer any questions that you may have from the session. Of course, there'll be some follow-up exercises as well, so should you have any questions after the session, we'll be providing contact details to make sure that we can answer your questions and help you in the best way that we can. I mean, the fact of the matter is, whether you're looking to move to the cloud, move to Office 365, whether you're already there, whether you're deploying it, Office 365 is a massively growing platform. I mean, revenues in last year alone were around $1.5 billion for Microsoft in Office 365. So it is a hugely growing platform. I believe in Q1 of this year it grew 100% year on year. So it's clearly a platform that clients and organizations are looking to adopt. And it's kind of fair to say that cloud conversations are a lot of the time are driven by cost, and that's absolutely understandable. If you think about the cost effectiveness of moving to a cloud-based platform like Office 365, the ability to consume technologies like SharePoint, Exchange, Link, and so forth without having to deploy your own hardware, your own maintenance schedules, the management of that infrastructure, it really becomes incredibly compelling to look at how we can help save money and how we can get a huge return on investment by moving to a cloud-based platform. And that drives a lot of conversation, and again is why Office 365 is becoming incredibly successful. However, there are other aspects we need to consider. The scalability element, for example. If you think about cloud, if you think about a platform like Office 365, I mean, I heard a statistic the other day that Microsoft are adding more servers per month than Facebook and their entire arsenal across their data centers. I mean, that just goes to show the scale of the operation, and organizations can hugely benefit from that scale, the ability to easily grow their business add new users, and ultimately ensure that as the business changes, as it grows, or as new requirements come into the fold, it can scale appropriately. And the fact that Microsoft are adding all of these servers, the fact that they are adding all of these data centers, just goes to show how clients can truly leverage the economies of scale that the cloud, that Office 365 affords. And then, of course, that scale leads to a huge amount of agility. There are the web, Microsoft themselves are inundated with case studies where clients are really reaping the benefits of being able to leverage a cloud-based platform and ultimately become much more agile in their business. Whether they have bursts of activity, as I mentioned before, where new requirements come into the fold. Traditionally, the ability to move with the changing pace of the organization is inherently challenging from an IT perspective in a traditional sense. But by leveraging the cloud, by the ability just to add new users and to consume, and as I say, where bursts of activity come in, where there's any kind of event or organic-driven growth, acquisitions in the organization, whatever it might be, the ability to respond very quickly means that you can get a huge amount more benefit from a platform like the cloud, and it also means that you can become a lot more competitive where necessary as well. So that agility by adopting cloud is, and Office 365 in particular, has a huge amount of benefit. We're working with a large charity right now where they're moving to Office 365 and saving in the regions of 81% of their storage alone by moving to the cloud, and of course reaping those benefits of scalability and agility, and that's absolutely key. So there are huge amounts of benefits, and the list kind of goes on. And to be honest, I'm probably explaining things that you may already be aware of, most likely, and already appreciate. But we also have to then consider some of the challenges surrounding the move to the cloud, the move to Office 365. And that all stems from the business requirement. Now, in our experience, AI work with a lot of government and private sector organizations, where aspects such as policy and information governance are absolutely fundamental to moving to the cloud. However, historically, that's actually quite a challenge. Managing your information effectively, ensuring your content stays in the right place, in the right format, and getting visibility and reporting on understanding where your content is, and whether it is meeting legal obligations, your own internal policy obligations, and so forth. These are all aspects which can be quite challenging when moving to a cloud-based platform. You don't have the ability to augment or enhance as much as you would do, say, in a traditional on-premise platform. And equally, you don't necessarily have the control over where your information is actually stored. And again, that can be quite fundamental for a lot of businesses. Now, irrespective of that, in the last sort of 12 months or so, 75% of Fortune 500 companies have actually moved to Office 365 based on objectives like protecting privacy, securing their data, and ensuring they comply with regulatory standards. But we have to ensure that those objectives can actually be met. And without the full control and the augmentability and so forth, then getting that transparency in where your information is being stored, making sure you are complying with your obligations, can be reasonably challenging. And that sometimes can introduce a certain amount of risk. So for example, if you're a large bank and you're dealing with a merger and acquisition between two different countries, well, there's a likelihood that any information stored or transmitted can only reside in those two countries. But how can we control that? By moving to a cloud-based platform. And ultimately, how do we ensure that we can see where that information is? It's all well and good saying that's happening, but how do we ensure we get that visibility and we get that reportability? So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at AI to ensure we can overcome these kinds of objections and these kinds of issues that we do hear quite frequently, to ensure that the cloud is still an option, but we augment and enhance our approach slightly to meet our business objectives and meet those challenges. Many organizations are moving to platform-based IT delivery, areas like Office 365, but as I've mentioned, the strategy and the requirements absolutely need to fit with what the organization is looking to achieve and what requirements they have to meet. And our approach, it's not one size fits all. even if you're going to a largely based or almost 100% cloud-based strategy, it doesn't necessarily mean that a complete single solution will actually meet those business requirements. And again, what we kind of see in our experience is organizations looking at a single platform and trying to shoehorn that to meet their objectives as best they can, and potentially introduce compromise and even maybe and potentially not even meet some of the requirements that they have set out. So rather than looking to adopt that kind of single platform, what we look at is how we can get the best of both worlds, how we can get the best of potentially multiple environments or at least one or two different delivery mechanisms to ensure that any requirements that we have, legal obligations, policy-driven requirements or otherwise, can be met by getting the best of the cloud, hybrid environments, or even leveraging some of the on-premise solutions that are available today. Now, when a lot of people think about things like hybrid, they think, well, actually that's adding complexity, potentially additional costs and so forth. Well, this is what we specialize in at AI. This is how we can help you ease that burden by looking at a complete solution rather than a siloed single platform that may or may not meet your entire objectives. So right now, as we speak, we're working with a number of large government and private organizations to do exactly that. Because in our experience, for now at least, as obviously the cloud is evolving all the time, it's all about meeting that business need and making sure we build out a solution, whether it's one or many delivery methods, to ensure those requirements are met, to ensure that you have a robust, scalable, but ultimately compliant and usable environment. So right now, just as an example, we're working with a large central government client who are based in a number of countries, around 100 countries, connecting millions of people within the United Kingdom. Now, they as an organization provide a number of extranets and have a number of partner relationships and institutions that they work with to build out successful delivery of these programs. Now, they had a desire to move to the cloud to make sure they reap the benefits of the costs, to get the scalability and agility and other benefits that we've already been discussing. But a single platform to meet these objectives just didn't quite meet all of the requirements. So in fact, what we're doing right now is building out an environment which does take the advantage of areas like Office 365 for that cost, scale, and agility capability, but also brings in elements of private cloud, private hosted environments, on-premise environments as well, so they can comply with certain obligations they have to meet, such as storing IL-free or official sensitive data, that sort of thing, which unfortunately can't necessarily be met with more public cloud-hosted offerings. So it's not to say that they haven't gone down that route. They have. But in those situations where we need more control, more policy, and certain obligations to fulfill, we're also bridging the gap and bringing in some of those other elements as well as some of those other platforms. And what we're also doing is ensuring the user is brought into this discussion and brought into this conversation as well. It's all well and good delivering a platform that's going to achieve all of these elements, but without the usability, without ensuring that your users are productive, that they can use the platform in the first place, unfortunately, it's probably not going to be successful. We need to ensure that we deliver this platform, but we deliver it in such a way that the user can actually use it in the best way. So again, this is going to always be a challenge when we're considering the hybrid environment that I've been discussing throughout the session. If we've got multiple environments, well then how does the user know where to go? Where do they do their work? How do we ensure that they are compliant? And again, that's what we do at AI, and that's what I'm going to show you in a moment with a brief demonstration to explain how we can bridge the gap between the usability, productivity, and control. We can deliver a great user experience, but what we want to do is ensure we achieve that. We leverage these new platforms or these different platforms without compromising policy and control. AI very much enable this kind of cloud-based adoption, and we enable these capabilities for a specific set of offerings that I'm going to discuss now and show you with a brief demonstration. And then obviously we can show you how we can follow up with some of these exercises as well. So I think that's enough slides for now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump out of my my slides, and I'm just going to open up my browser. And I just want to kind of illustrate some of the points that I've just been discussing, just to show you how we can achieve some of these objectives. Now, if we consider we're in our SharePoint environment, okay, so this is, as you can see, SharePoint 2013, and this is actually SharePoint hosted on Windows Azure. The reason we've done that is, as I've mentioned, we need to get the best of both worlds, and we want to, there are certain situations where we need to store content in a more controlled environment where we know where the data is being stored, what location, and so forth. So we have this environment. But of course, we also want to leverage the cloud and Office 365, which I have over here as well. So we can actually start looking at how we manage that content and information. Before I do that, let's think about the first step when a user potentially comes in to use the platform. And the first thing they might want to do, say that you're working on a new project, is they want to create a new workspace. So obviously SharePoint has templates and so forth. I'm going to click this Create Workspace button down here. What you'll see there is there's something slightly different. What we're doing is, with AI, is we're delivering a platform which controls that experience. It enables and empowers the user to do what they need to do their job very easily, but we're doing it in a very controlled manner. So what we're doing is we're providing, in this case, in this example, a number of templates which have been predefined to ensure that whenever a user is doing some kind of work, project, reporting, or otherwise, they do it in a compliant way. And you can see I have a number of templates that I can select from that have been pre-configured and predefined. And I'm going to select this template at the bottom here. The next thing that allows me then to do is create a workspace name. So I'm going to call this workspace government project, for example. You'll see then I have some other options. In this case, I want to select whether the site will contain operationally sensitive data. And I'm going to say no. Now these criteria, these questions, what's actually filled out in these part of this process is, of course, can be tailored to what it is you want to achieve. So for demonstration purposes, we'll keep it relatively simple. And then you'll see then that certain libraries and users are going to be added to this particular site based upon the selections I've made and the template I've selected in that first step. So you'll see in this case, it will create a specific library, it will create different users, and it will add specific users and user groups to that particular site. And it's doing that automatically based upon the type of content I'm going to be working with, whether it's sensitive, reporting, or whatever it might be. You'll see then also that policies are going to be applied. In this case, tax returns must be kept for a minimum of 6 years. So again, what we're doing is very much over and above what SharePoint does out of the box. We're actually adding policy and applying that at the very inception of this particular site. So when I go ahead and then click Create, that site is going to be created. Now, one of the things I haven't actually mentioned is, depending on the selections that I've made, will depend on where that site is actually being created. So in this case, because I'm not creating operationally sensitive data, I can actually create that site in Office 365 and point my user to that particular location. If I am storing sensitive data, and if I have other criteria which is going to determine whether that site should be created on-premise or in the cloud, that will be defined and obviously created accordingly. In this case, we're creating it in 365. So if I go into my site content, you'll see that my government project is now being created, modified 1 minute ago. That's being created in my Office 365 environment. So what you can see here already is we're augmenting and enhancing SharePoint, and we're bridging that gap. So now if I just refresh, just to make sure that site has been created, and I go to my government project that I just started, you'll see now that my site has been created with a projects document folder, tax returns folder, as I required, and certain other documentation and policies and so forth that have been automatically applied, so the user can then go out and do their own thing. And they're doing this in such a way that the user can do their work very easily, but they don't have to worry about being compliant. We control that centrally, and we're reducing that risk of ensuring information is being stored in the right place. But as you can see as well, we're leveraging multiple platforms to actually deliver this mechanism, and we're bridging that gap to make that as effective and make the user as effective as we possibly can. Now, once we're in and we have our site, then what happens next? So if I go back to my site, for example, I've already created my workspace, but what happens if I want, how do I interact with that information? So let's go with my site that I've already got because it has some information in. And then how do I ensure that once my user is actually utilizing the site, once they have a space to work in this example, how do they do their job in a compliant way? And there's a few ways in which we do that as well. So first of all, if I go into, for example, budget reports in this particular library, you'll see I have a number of different criteria and metadata attributes that I can add into my document. Now, of course, metadata is very key because if we consider the fact that when I'm adding metadata to my document, it's going to augment search, it's going to ensure that my data is kept up to date, it's going to maybe kick off workflows, it provides a huge amount of context and capability. So metadata is absolutely fundamental, but as a user, having to add all of those metadata terms is quite challenging. It potentially is a lot of work. So what's the user going to do? They're just going to put in dummy metadata or maybe nothing in at all, which is not really what we want them to do. So what we can then do instead is with our enhancements to SharePoint in the cloud or on-premise, we can add things like metadata inheritance. So when the user is working in their workspace, they're adding content, they're adding documents in, but they don't have to worry about adding reams and reams of metadata because it's inherited automatically based upon where that document is being uploaded to. So again, we're being sympathetic to the user. We're ensuring they can carry out their job very easily, but at the same time, we're ensuring that their work is done in the most effective and efficient way to comply with policy. So I can go ahead and save that document in, and there I go, the document's there with the metadata augmented automatically. There are a few other things we can do as well. If I go to my ribbon in SharePoint, let's refresh the page, you'll see that I have some other facilities that I can call upon as well to ensure that I'm compliant, whilst, again, making sure the user has a great experience. So things like the clipboard, the ability to relocate content between locations in SharePoint. Again, something that SharePoint regrettably doesn't provide out of the box, but if I need to take some documents and I need to move them to a different location, let's move them to another folder, then I can go ahead and do that very easily. You'll see I can copy those documents and I can then paste them into my new location. But what we also do is we add a certain amount of auditability, so I have to add a reason, and I can decide whether my metadata, security, and so forth are either preserved from the original location or added into my, my new folder. So again, what we're doing is we're ensuring that we are compliant, we, whilst at the same time providing that user experience so that they can easily control where their information is being stored where necessary. And of course, we can control who can actually do these things and how they can work on this content. So we're providing a lot of enhancements and additions to SharePoint to ensure that we can remain compliant. We ensure elements like metadata are being added. But again, how do we ensure we bridge that gap between the user and ensure the platform is actually successfully adopted? So one of the ways we do that is through Outlook. Outlook is a fantastic mechanism to bring the user in, because if the user can use a familiar and easy-to-use interface like Outlook that they already know and love, then that means that, again, we can bridge that gap and we can kind of ease them into utilizing the platform, whether it is in 365, on-premise, or a combination of the above. So you'll see I'm connected to my Office 365 environment here. I have an information workspace where I can browse all my various sites and libraries that I'm connected to. And I have a number of sites here. I have an Office 365 site. I have an on-premise site. I have my OneDrive site, my OneDrive for Business site as well. So I can actually control information and interact with information across a number of different platforms. And if I select one of these, you'll see that what actually happens is that it connects that particular workspace and then brings through the content that I have available to me. So this all exists in Office 365. In fact, I can briefly show you if I go to my Office 365 project site and I go to my key documents. This is actually where my information is being stored here. So if I go to my library here. So in fact, this is showing the documentation just here on this front page. So I can show you then, for example, I can open the location in the browser, I can edit, add, check out the document if I want to, check it back in, edit it again, save it, whatever I need to do, I can actually carry that out through the Outlook interface. So it becomes very easy for me as a user to interact with that content via the Outlook platform. So I can edit and save and add content via Outlook. What I can also do is bring content in to SharePoint via Outlook as well. So whether that's email, I can drag that in to my SharePoint Office 365 or other environment. I can drag in content from my desktop if I want to as well, or I can bring in attachments very, very simply by drag and drop. So what this is allowing me to do is it allows me to, again, bridge the gap, as I've already mentioned, but ensures that any content that maybe exists in Outlook is not siloed. It doesn't stay in one single place. I can actually leverage the Outlook interface to bring content into SharePoint, as well as access SharePoint content, potentially without even having to go into SharePoint itself. And again, whether that's 365 or on-premise or private hosted, whatever it may be, we can actually leverage this enhancement to Outlook to ensure that we have that great user experience. If I now go into my project document, you'll see that this the content that I've dragged and dropped will now be uploaded into my SharePoint workspace. There we go. So you'll see the documents that I've added in. You'll see the emails I've added in. You can see we've also added and made sure that the metadata has been appropriately applied, project information data in this case. And if I view an email, the metadata of an email, you'll see that the metadata surrounding the email has automatically been applied as well. So what I'm ultimately showing you here is how we can ensure that we can get content into SharePoint, but we can do it in a compliant way. Users are actually interacting with SharePoint environments that they have access to. Of course, if they don't have access to a particular location, they won't be able to do so. And when they bring content into SharePoint, metadata is applied, policy is applied, everything is done in a compliant way. And again, we're providing that seamless experience across different platforms via Outlook. So again, that's a very important way we enhance the interface. So once we've done that, and once we've provided that kind of interaction, the user is now, as you can see, doing things in a way that they feel comfortable, and they're doing it in a compliant fashion. But how do we ensure that as a business, we are complying with the various policies and procedures and obligations that we have to ensure a compliant environment? So what we can also deliver, and what we're delivering right now, is a policy-driven approach so that you can see at a very top level the policy that I actually have within my environment. As you can see, I can get a top-level view through a dashboard on how my policy is being applied across my environments, whether it is Office 365 or on-premise or otherwise. So in this context, this isn't necessarily the user interacting. This is a information manager or an information owner ensuring that when they are managing the policy within the business, they can do so for a single interface and have a single snapshot of what's going on. So for example, if I want to look at this particular policy for quarterly reports, I can see that the policy to keep that information is a minimum of 6 years. Of course, I can change that if I need to as well to another policy should I need to do so. And I can publish that out. And I can also get some statistics and views on what kind of content is meeting that policy and anything that potentially isn't as well. So what I'm doing here is getting a very top-level snapshot on what's going on across my environment, across my solution, not necessarily in a single siloed platform. So I can manage the policy through this dashboard. I can retrieve policy updates from external sources. So for example, the content group have a data aggregation service called the Cube, and we can bring those policies through as well. So we can see, for example, that a policy for equity transaction data reports need to be kept for a minimum of 4 years. Well, actually, we need to keep them for 6 years to comply with maybe US regulations. So let's change that as well, and then we can publish that out through my environment at a certain date. So what we're ultimately doing here is we're taking control. We're taking control of the policy that we have within our environment. We're ensuring that we are complying with those obligations, but we're doing so in such a way that it's incredibly that we are compliant and we're doing everything that we need to do. So it's very much about that visibility and reducing the risk to ensure that changes can be made, policies can be viewed, and that anything we need to do to control the environment is done so in very much a compliant way. So really, this has been a snapshot. I'll admit a very quick snapshot in terms of how we can help control environments in Office 365. So that policy-driven approach very much applies to Office 365 as it does to on-premise as well. Because if we consider what we've done at AI in the past, what we've talked about in the past around understanding your information, profiling the data, transitioning it, migrating it to the cloud, understanding the information that you've got and getting it to the right place, what we're really focusing on here is this stage 3 of our flow, if you like, of getting to and adopting a cloud-based platform, ensuring that your users are productive through great user interfaces, ensure they can find information, ensuring policy is met and controlled, and ensuring that information is governed and reported on, and ensuring that things like metadata is applied, and ultimately we have an environment that the user loves to work in, but at the same time we have the control and effectively users are working in a compliant way whilst ensuring that we have that governance framework in place. What I've shown you today is a bit of a snapshot, as I've mentioned, because there are lots of ways in which we might achieve this, and as I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about the business requirements. You know, we've talked about all these mechanisms of how we can achieve and do some of these things, but we have to do it in such a way that we are going to deliver a user experience that meets the needs of the business. AI have a huge amount of experience and knowledge around how we can tailor that experience to meet your own business needs. So what we're really asking is that you leverage the experience and expertise that we can deliver and that we've proven to do so in the past to ensure that if you are looking to adopt a cloud-based platform but you have concerns about policy, about legal requirements, or about ensuring that your own requirements are going to be met, rather than doing that and compromising some of those areas, we can hopefully show you how we can achieve all of those objectives potentially across a range of different delivery mechanisms, but ultimately doing it in such a way that you are going to meet your requirements at the best that you can. So that's really, in the last sort of 30 minutes or so, what we wanted to discuss in today's session. Now, I appreciate that there's been a lot that we've obviously gone through and discussed today. So first of all, very keen to see if you have any questions that you might want to ask around some of the areas I've shown you at a very high level. So please, as I mentioned, do use the Q&A pane to ask any questions that you may have. But at the same time, we're very happy to follow up with you as well, because the theme of this webinar is all about ensuring we meet your business requirements. And to do that, we need to understand them. So if you do have any questions, post this session that you are looking to discuss individually, then I'm providing some contact details up there now, so you can get in touch with us should you need to do so via email, social media, or whichever mechanism suits you best. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. I hope this has been a webinar that's given you a little bit of information, but ultimately what we want to get across today is that we can deliver these projects, we can deliver these mechanisms without having to do it in such a long time. Our experience dictates that these kinds of projects, while leveraging the cloud, they don't have to take 2 years. We can build. We've seen these environments built out in a few months. So rather than have these projects remain stagnant, rather than having them take such a long time, we'll look at your requirements and understand how we can achieve those in a much shorter time frame. So that's really what we're about. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to look at some of the questions you have as well. So let me just have a look at the Q&A pane and see what questions are coming through. So I had a really interesting business case just come through regards to, a question come through regarding the business case and how we justify all of these elements financially. Well, that's a fantastic question, and frankly, as I mentioned before, it's something it's probably the one question we come across the most. And there's no silver bullet, first of all, so if you're expecting that, I do apologize. But given examples of how we've looked at justifying the business case, well, A lot of clients, for example, have a lot of content. They store a lot of information in a lot of different mediums, and they have huge amounts of duplication, redundant content and information that's stored across a variety of different platforms, different content management platforms and file shares and various other content mediums. And of course, content is only ever growing significantly. As you add users, but particularly as you add new devices and new ways of doing things, content grows disproportionately. And that increases costs dramatically. So one of the things we do with our clients, and this was the subject of a previous webinar, so we'd be very keen to ensure if you weren't on it that we send you the information and obviously follow up with you on that. But one of the exercises we do at the very beginning of any engagement is understanding where money can be saved. And that's done through storage consolidation, platform consolidation, reducing the amount of systems and content management platforms that you're currently using, and consolidating that down to a single solution which is going to meet your business needs. And that may be 365, and it may be other platforms or other things that are going to meet those business requirements. But that's normally an exercise that yields a huge amount of information in terms of where information can actually be saved. And once that's done, then that starts to build up the business case and starts justifying some of the costs of moving to the cloud. So I think what we'll do there is follow up with you. We have your question and contact details for you specifically, although I appreciate that may apply to many others on the call. So please do get in touch with us and we'll make sure we send you that information. So thank you for that question. So another question I've had is well, it's a fundamental one as well, is how we license this. Well, you know, again, we provide a lot of delivery mechanisms to do this. And what we try and do is provide a licensing mechanism which is going to, again, kind of fit in your own requirements, whether that's perpetual, subscription, whether that's licensing through a third-party provider that you may already work with. We're very flexible in terms of how we will deliver that. Obviously, you still need to license SharePoint and Office 365. We will not have control of how Microsoft licenses their platforms, but in terms of how we augment and enhance SharePoint, then we can absolutely provide a flexible approach which is going to meet any requirements that you have. So, you know, again, I'd ask you to get in touch with us. We'll have that conversation, establish exactly how we can help you and how we can best provide a procurement route that's going to work best for you. So I've just got another question that's come through. Let me just have a quick read of it. Oh, okay, so that was just a comment, so thank you for that comment. Yep, no, absolutely no problem at all. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. So yeah, I'm very happy to follow up with you around how we do that. Interestingly enough, a comment you raised there in terms of how do you select the right system? How do you select the right platform? And again, yeah, I wish there was a silver bullet for that. I mean, obviously, for very small organizations that want to consume content in a vanilla way, yeah, Office 365 is fantastic for that. You know, I think what we really want to concentrate on here, or what we really specialize in, is that, you know, how do we take that to the next level? You know, I think 99.9% of our customers do not have a vanilla requirement. They don't just want a bit of content management and they're all good. They actually have more complex requirements around meeting policy requirements, ensuring they meet their legal obligation. As I mentioned, we work a lot with very large central government clients, so obviously have requirements around data retention and security, ensuring content stored in the right platform and the right storage media that meet the security requirements, location-based requirements, and so forth. We're also working with large banks who spend around 25% of IT budget on storage alone, and you know, talking multi-billion-pound budgets here. So, you know, this is these are areas where we are very good at. So, if you feel you have the requirement where you're not quite sure on the platform that's required, obviously I won't answer that in today's session, but of course, if we will work with you to build out that platform. We have a lot of experience and knowledge in terms of doing that. So one of the other questions I've just had come through is, well, what about ensuring that information control and retention? How do I ensure that information is stored in the right, in the right way? How do I ensure it's stored for the right length of time? SharePoint, at its very base, has certain records management, information management capabilities, which do meet some of those requirements. However, again, why a lot of our customers come to us, it's very much because they SharePoint natively doesn't quite meet some of the objectives and requirements information managers have and records management consultants have around ensuring that information is stored for the right length of time, to ensure that I can easily control how information is being stored for that length and how it's disposed, and also meeting certain standards like MOREC 2010 and obligations for the National Archives and so forth. So how we augment and enhance SharePoint and Office 365 is very much around meeting those obligations. So areas like being able to relocate content is a prime example that I've already shown you. The ability to bring in email content easily into SharePoint. Again, natively, it's very, very difficult. So with our enhancements to Outlook, working with SharePoint, we can do that very simply. So we have a lot of capability to ensure SharePoint has that functionality to meet those kinds of obligations. And again, we're delighted to speak to you about how we can do that. So it looks like we don't have any other questions coming through at this stage. So and we're right up to time as well. That's not like me. So with that, I'd like to thank you once again for the time spent on today's webinar. I hope you found it useful. If you do have any questions at the end of the session or after the session is closed, then please do get in touch with us. We'll be delighted to speak to you further. And once again, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.